My life's effort for our family's Weighty legacy grant now collides with my younger sister's favored status, tightening as the deadline looms. It's funny how a family legacy, something built to last for generations, can feel like a tombstone hanging over your head. In my family, that tombstone had a name, the Evans Progenitor Grant. It was established back in 1960 by my great-grandfather, a man who clawed his way up from nothing to build an empire. He wanted to ensure that at least one Evans in every generation had the one thing he never did: a debt-free, top-tier education, $250,000. It wasn't just a scholarship, it was the crown jewel of our family, a testament to our name. And this year, it was my turn to earn it. My name is Ezekiel Evans. As of this spring, I was 18 years old and my entire life had been a meticulously planned sprint toward this single goal. Every AP class, every late-night study session, every extracurricular, it was all currency to be exchanged for the grant. It was a merit-based award, and I had the merit. My GPA was pristine, my test scores were in the top percentile, and my application essays were polished until they gleamed. I wasn't just a candidate, I was the only candidate. And then there was my sister, Audrey. Audrey was 17, a year younger than me, and lived life on a completely different frequency. Where my world was ordered by deadlines and syllabi, hers was a vibrant, chaotic swirl of social media and friend drama. She wasn't a bad student, she just coasted. B+s were celebrated as major victories, and homework was something you crammed in during lunch period. She was beautiful, charming, and effortlessly popular, all the things I wasn't. And she was without a doubt my parents' favorite. The favoritism wasn't loud or cruel. It was a quiet but constant current that ran through our house. It was in the way my dad's eyes would light up when Audrey told a rambling story about her day, while my academic achievements earned a polite, distracted, "That's great, son." It was in the way my mom would spend hours helping Audrey pick out a prom dress, but would just leave a check on my desk for my school expenses. I was the reliable one, the one they didn't have to worry about. I was the family's investment. Audrey was the family's heart. This dynamic became 1,000 times more intense as the June 15th application deadline for the grant approached. The air in our house grew thick with tension. Every dinner conversation somehow found its way back to the scholarship. "Ezekiel, did you get that final letter of recommendation from Mr. Harrison?" my dad would ask, not looking up from his steak. "Yes, Dad, it's all in the portfolio. I just need to write the final personal statement." "Don't rush it," my mom would chime in, her voice tight. "This isn't just about you. The grant is a reflection on this entire family, on our reputation." You see, my parents weren't just bystanders. After my grandfather passed away in 2004, they assumed his position on the grant's advisory committee. They held 2 seats as family nominators. They didn't have the final vote that was left to an independent board, but they were the gatekeepers responsible for vetting and officially submitting the applications from our family line. To them, that influence was everything. Having their son be the undeniable star candidate was a point of pride they intended to cash in. One evening, about 2 weeks before the deadline, I was in my room staring at a blank page on my laptop. The cursor blinked, mocking me. The final essay prompt was, "Describe a time you upheld your integrity in the face of adversity." Nothing I could think of felt grand enough for $250,000. My door creaked open and Audrey leaned against the frame, scrolling through her phone. "Still doing that?" she asked, not looking up. "It's the final essay for the grant, Audrey. It's kind of important." She glanced at me, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "You're going to get it, Z. You always get everything." She said it not with jealousy, but with a kind of bored resignation, as if my success was a law of nature like gravity. "It's not that simple," I said, rubbing my temples. "It has to be perfect." "Whatever." She sighed, her attention back on her phone. "Mom says you need to hurry up. She wants to review the whole package this weekend." She pushed off the door frame and disappeared down the hall. She was right. My parents insisted on reviewing every single word of my application. They called it quality control, claiming it was their duty as family nominators to ensure the submission was flawless. At the time, I accepted it as them being their usual overbearing selves. I didn't see it for what it truly was. The pressure mounted. My dad would leave articles on my desk about past winners. My mom would helpfully remind me that the son of another prominent family had just won a prestigious national scholarship. The subtext was clear. Don't you dare be the one to fail. I felt like a show pony being groomed for the big race. And the worst part was, I desperately wanted to win. I dreamed of walking onto my university campus that fall, knowing my future was secure, knowing I had earned it. I wanted to make them proud to finally earn the kind of warm approval they gave Audrey for just existing. A week before the deadline, we had a family meeting at the dinner table. My dad cleared his throat. "Ezekiel," he began, "your mother and I believe it's best if we handle the final digital submission. Just get all the components finalized and we will upload them through the official committee portal. We don't want any last-minute technical glitches." I hesitated. I had wanted to hit the submit button myself to have that moment of catharsis. But arguing with my dad when he used his official business tone was pointless. "Okay," I said. "I should have everything finalized by Tuesday. That gives you 3 days before the deadline." "Excellent," he said with a decisive nod. My mom smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We're just so proud of the work you put in, sweetie. You are the perfect candidate." Audrey just pushed her mashed potatoes around her plate silent. I looked over at her and she had a strange expression, a mix of guilt and defiance. When she saw me looking, she quickly smoothed it into a mask of indifference. I dismissed it as some drama with her friends. The final days were a blur of caffeine and proofreading. It was my future bound up in a collection of digital files. On Tuesday night, I saved the final version to a folder on our shared desktop clearly labeled Ezekiel, Evans Grant, Final. I went to my parents' study. "It's done," I announced, feeling a wave of relief. "It's on the desktop, ready to go." My dad stood and put a firm hand on my shoulder. "Good work, son. You've done your part. We'll take it from here." For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The weight was lifted. It was out of my hands. As I walked out of that study, I felt a genuine flicker of hope. Maybe after this was all over, after I had secured the family's reputation, they'd finally see me. Not as their investment, but as their son. I let myself believe that the tombstone hanging over my head was finally being taken down. I couldn't have known they were just getting a better grip before letting it fall. The weeks that followed were strangely quiet. The crushing weight of the application was gone, replaced by the lazy, humid days of a summer spent in limbo. It was late July, that sticky, anxious period between finishing high school and starting the rest of your life. I was working a part-time job at a local bookstore, saving up what I could for textbooks and dorm supplies, operating under the blissful assumption that the big things were already handled. Every time I thought about the grant, a little hum of nervous excitement would start in my chest. I had done everything right. I had put in the years of work, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, and I had trusted my parents to see it across the finish line. That trust was the foundation of my world. It was a flawed foundation, sure, with cracks of favoritism and unrealistic expectations, but I never believed it was structurally unsound. I never believed it would collapse. The day it all came down was a Sunday, July 28th. I remember the air was thick as soup and the cicadas were buzzing in a deafening, monotonous drone. My laptop, a gift from a few years prior, had finally decided to give up the ghost that morning, its screen flickering into a permanent, pixelated darkness. I had a mandatory training module for my bookstore job that I needed to complete online, so I had no choice but to use the old family desktop. It was a clunky machine tucked away in a corner of the den, a relic of my parents' insistence on having a centralized family computer. No one really used it anymore except to print things. As the machine whirred to life with a groan, I felt a strange sense of nostalgia. This was the computer I'd written my first book reports on, the one where Audrey and I used to play flash games until Mom yelled at us to go outside. It felt safe, familiar. After finishing my training module, I remembered I needed to print a copy of my resume for a potential second job. I knew I had a version saved somewhere on this machine. I clicked open the File Explorer, navigating through the digital clutter of years past. There were folders named Vacation Photos 2018, Taxes and Audrey's School Projects, Standard family stuff. Then I saw it, a folder on the main desktop created by my father's user profile. It was labeled simply University Submissions. My heart gave a little flutter. Maybe they had saved a final copy of my grant application in there. It would be nice to have for my own records. I double-clicked and the folder opened to reveal 2 subfolders. One was labeled Ezekiel. The other was labeled Audrey. I froze, my hand hovering over the mouse. My first thought was confusion. Audrey. Why would she have a university submission folder? She was a year behind me, still a rising senior. Maybe my parents were just getting a head start on her college prep, having her practice filling out applications. Yeah, that had to be it. It was weird, but it was the kind of hyper-involved, borderline obsessive thing my parents would do. Curiosity got the better of me. I clicked on my folder first. Inside it was exactly what I expected. Every document was perfectly organized: my final essay, my academic transcripts, my list of extracurriculars, letters of recommendation. I even saw a PDF file named submission underscore confirmation underscore Evans underscore Ezekiel.pdf. I opened it. There it was, the official confirmation from the Evans Progenitor Grant portal, timestamped June 15th. A wave of relief washed over me again. It was real. It was sent. I closed the file, and with a sense of unease I couldn't quite shake, I navigated back and opened the folder labeled Audrey. The air in the room suddenly felt cold. It was laid out in the exact same way as mine. There was an essay file, a transcript file, an extracurriculars list, and there at the bottom was a file that made my blood run cold. Submission underscore confirmation underscore Evans underscore Audrey.pdf. My breath hitched. I clicked on it, my hand trembling so badly I almost missed the icon. The document loaded. It was a confirmation page from the same grant portal, for the same Evans Progenitor Grant, and the timestamp was the same. June 15th. It wasn't a practice application. They had submitted it. They had submitted 2 applications. A sick, swirling feeling started in my stomach. Why would they do this? It made no sense. The grant was for 1 descendant per generation. Submitting 2 would just confuse the board, maybe even get them both disqualified. Was this some kind of colossal mistake? Had they uploaded the wrong files? I had to see what was in them. I went back to the folder and opened the document labeled Audrey underscore essay underscore final. The first paragraph loaded and the world tilted on its axis. The words were familiar, hauntingly familiar. It was my essay, the one I had spent months perfecting, the one I had poured my soul into, about my grandfather's influence and my passion for engineering. But it was twisted. The core ideas were mine, the key anecdotes were mine, but the words were slightly different, rearranged. My grandfather became our asterisk grandfather. My personal struggles with a complex physics problem became a story about how Audrey was inspired by my asterisk dedication. It was my voice, my story, but it was wearing my sister's name like a cheap costume. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I felt a hot flush of adrenaline, a primal sense of violation. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. With a growing sense of dread, I clicked open the next file, Audrey underscore extracurriculars. My extracurriculars. My 4 years on the debate team, where I had served as captain, was listed as Audrey being the team manager. My volunteer work at the local science museum was there, but my name was replaced with hers. The coding club I founded was listed as an activity she was a founding member of. They had taken my life's work for the past 4 years and handed it to her on a silver platter. They hadn't just lied. They had stolen my achievements. The final click was the hardest. I opened the file labeled Audrey underscore transcript underscore official. It looked like my transcript. The layout was the same, the school crest was in the corner. But the name at the top was Audrey Evans. In the grades, they had changed the grades. My A+ in AP Calculus and Physics were now her A+. They had taken a photo of my official school records and digitally altered them. They had committed fraud, actual documentable fraud. I pushed my chair back from the desk, a strangled noise escaping my throat. I felt like I was going to be sick. The room was spinning. The quiet hum of the computer fans sounded like a jet engine. They had looked me in the eye. They had put a hand on my shoulder and told me, "Good work, son. We'll take it from here." They had taken my work, the very essence of my academic identity, and used it to build a fraudulent case for their favorite child. The unspoken words from every family dinner, every holiday, every comparison suddenly screamed in my mind. Asterisk Audrey is the one who needs looking after. You'll be fine, Ezekiel. You always land on your feet. They didn't just believe it. They were willing to break the law to enforce it. They were willing to sabotage my future to secure hers. The $250,000 scholarship wasn't just a prize. It was my ticket out. It was freedom. It was the validation I had craved my entire life, proof that my hard work mattered. And my parents had decided in cold blood that I didn't deserve it. They had decided my sister, who had spent her high school years focused on social status and doing the bare minimum, was more entitled to the fruits of my labor than I was. I sat there for what felt like an hour, just staring at the screen. The initial shock gave way to a wave of grief so profound it felt like a physical weight on my chest. The image of my parents smiling proudly and telling me they were handling the submission, it replayed in my head, curdling into something monstrous. Their pride wasn't for me. It was for their own cleverness. Their quality control wasn't to help me. It was to steal from me. And Audrey, my sister, her strange, guilty expression at the dinner table, her bored resignation. She knew, she must have known. She was a party to it. She was willing to ride my coattails all the way to a university she hadn't earned with a scholarship she didn't deserve. The grief was followed by something else, something cold and hard and sharp. It was rage, a pure, clarifying anger that burned away the tears before they could even form. They had underestimated me. They saw me as their workhorse, their reliable, predictable son who would just take the hit and keep going. They thought they could hollow me out for my sister's benefit, and I would just accept it for the good of the family. They were wrong. My mind went quiet. The emotional storm receded, leaving behind a chilling calm. I knew exactly what I had to do. The tombstone they had been holding over my head my entire life. They hadn't just let it fall. They had shown me exactly how they'd carved my name on it. And they had left the tools lying right there on the family computer. I stood up, my movements steady and precise. I walked over to the printer and inserted a fresh USB drive into the front port. I didn't just look at the evidence anymore. I started to collect it. I navigated back to the university submissions folder. I copied my folder. I copied Audrey's folder. I made a separate folder on the thumb drive and labeled it Proof. Then I went through my own personal files on the hard drive. I found my original unedited essay drafts. I found the emails from my teachers confirming my leadership positions. I dug up my official unaltered report cards that I had scanned from my own records months ago. I saved every single one of them into the Proof folder. I was building a case, my case, against my own family. When I was done, the USB drive felt heavy in my hand like a weapon. I ejected it safely, pulled it from the port, and slipped it into my pocket. I closed all the windows on the desktop, leaving it exactly as I had found it. I shut the computer down. As the old machine whirred into silence, the house was quiet again. But it was a different kind of quiet. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was the suffocating silence of a crime scene. I walked out of the den, leaving the scene of my own betrayal behind me, and for the first time I saw my family not with the blurry love of a son and a brother, but with the sharp, unforgiving clarity of a victim. And I knew with absolute certainty that this was not the end. This was the beginning. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in my room, the USB drive cold in my palm, and let the reality of it all wash over me. For 18 years, I had operated under the assumption that my family, despite their obvious favoritism, fundamentally had my best interests at heart. That illusion was now a pile of ash. They weren't just neglecting me. They were actively cannibalizing my future to feed my sisters. The next morning, I waited. I didn't say a word during breakfast. I watched them go through the motions, my dad reading the news on his tablet, my mom fussing over the coffee maker, Audrey scrolling through her phone completely oblivious. They were so comfortable in their deception, so certain they had gotten away with it. They thought I was a fool. I let the silence hang until my dad folded his tablet case. "Well, I'm off to the office," he announced. "Wait," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the morning chatter like a razor. All three of them stopped and looked at me. "I need to talk to you all. In the den. Now." The confusion on their faces was almost comical. I got up and walked to the den without looking back, hearing their hesitant footsteps follow. I went straight to the family computer, turned it on, and plugged in the USB drive. When they had all filed into the room looking nervous, I didn't waste any time. I opened a folder on the desktop labeled Proof. "I have a question," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I was looking for some old files yesterday and I found this." I clicked open two windows, placing them side by side on the screen. One was my application, the other was Audrey's. "Can someone explain to me why Audrey's scholarship application contains my academic achievements, my leadership roles, and a word-for-word copy of my personal essay?" The silence was deafening. My mother's face went pale. My father's jaw tightened, his eyes darting from the screen to me. Audrey just stared at her feet, refusing to look at anyone. My mother was the first to break. "Ezekiel, you don't understand." "Oh, I think I do," I said, my voice hardening. "I understand that you took my entire high school career, everything I worked for, and you photoshopped my sister's name onto it. You submitted a fraudulent application hoping the board wouldn't notice. You were going to let me think I lost and let her take the $250,000 I earned. My father stepped forward, his expression shifting from shock to a stern paternal authority. Now hold on, we need to be rational about this. Rational? I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Was it rational to commit fraud, to forge documents, to steal from your own son? We didn't steal from you, my mother cried, her voice rising. The money stays in the family. Audrey needs this more than you do, Ezekiel. You're brilliant. You'll get other scholarships, other opportunities. Her path isn't as certain. We were just leveling the playing field, giving her the best possible chance. That was it. That was the moment my heart finally broke. They weren't even sorry. They were justifying it. They saw my hard work not as something to be proud of, but as a resource to be plundered for their favored child. So I'm just a safety net? I asked, my voice trembling with a rage I could no longer contain. My future is just a piggy bank you can break open whenever Audrey needs a boost. Don't be so dramatic, my father snapped. This is about what's best for the family as a whole. Your sister's future was at stake. We did what we had to do as parents. I turned to Audrey. She was still staring at the floor, chewing on her lip. And you, I asked, you were just going to go along with this. Take my scholarship, go to a university you didn't get into, and live a life built on my work. She finally looked up, her eyes filled with a pathetic mix of guilt and defiance. It's not my fault you're the smart one, she mumbled. Everyone always expects you to succeed. It's easy for you. The sheer, unadulterated entitlement of that statement knocked the wind out of me. They had coddled her for so long that she genuinely believed she was entitled to my success because her own was too hard to achieve. My father put his hands on his hips. The decision is made, Ezekiel. What's done is done. Now what we need from you is your silence. This has to stay within these four walls. You will not jeopardize your sister's future over some misplaced sibling rivalry. We are a family, and you will act like it. They were demanding my complicity. They wanted me to be a silent victim in my own destruction. In that moment, the last shred of familial duty I felt simply evaporated. I looked at their faces, my father's stern command, my mother's tearful pleading, my sister's sullen entitlement, and I felt nothing. No love, no connection. Just the cold, hard certainty of a stranger who has been wronged. I calmly closed the folders on the computer. I ejected the USB drive and slipped it back into my pocket. Okay, I said softly. The relief on their faces was immediate. My mother let out a shaky breath. My father nodded, a self-satisfied look in his eyes. They thought they'd won. They thought their authority and emotional manipulation had worked one last time. I walked out of the room, went upstairs, and locked my bedroom door. I didn't need the family computer anymore. I had my own laptop, I had my own scanner, and I had all the proof I needed on that little USB drive. On July the 28th, I sat at my desk and began to write. I composed the most professional, dispassionate email of my life addressed to the entire executive board of the Evans Progenitor Grant. The subject line was simple: formal complaint regarding fraudulent conduct in application process. In the body of the email, I laid out the facts. I explained my parents' position as family nominators. I detailed the discovery of the two applications. I attached everything: my official sealed transcripts from my high school, the forged transcripts they had created for Audrey, my original essays, the plagiarized versions under her name. I attached the submission confirmations, time-stamped and undeniable. I created a clear timeline of the fraud. I didn't use emotional language. I didn't talk about betrayal or favoritism. I presented it as a simple, objective case of a violation of the grant's integrity. I was a whistleblower, not a scorned son. When it was all done, I read it over 3 times. My finger hovered over the send button. This was the point of no return. I was about to detonate a bomb in the middle of my own family, a bomb that would vaporize a multi-generational legacy. But the alternative to live a lie, to silently accept their sacrifice of my future, was a fate worse than any fallout. I took a deep breath and I clicked send. The next week was the quietest, most tense week of my life. My family acted as if the confrontation had never happened, believing I had fallen in line. They were cheerful, discussing Audrey's dorm room shopping and orientation week. I just nodded along a ghost at my own dinner table, waiting for the axe to fall. It fell on August 5th. A thick cream-colored envelope arrived in the mail bearing the official insignia of the grant board. It was addressed to my parents. My mother brought it in from the mailbox, her face beaming. This must be the official award letter, she said excitedly, waving it in the air. They all gathered in the living room to open it. I stood in the doorway watching. My father slit the envelope open with a letter opener, his chest puffed out with pride. He unfolded the single sheet of paper inside and began to read. I watched the color drain from his face. His smile faltered, replaced by a slack-jawed confusion. He read it again, his eyes darting across the page. "No," he whispered. "No, this can't be right." My mother snatched the letter from his hand. Her eyes scanned it, and a horrified gasp escaped her lips. "What? What does this mean?" Audrey took the letter from her. She read it and her face crumpled. "It's gone," she choked out. "The money's gone." The letter was brutal in its corporate efficiency. It stated that following a formal review, the board had discovered evidence of familial fraudulent conduct and a severe breach of the grant's integrity clause. As a result, the Evans progenitor grant was permanently rescinded for both Ezekiel Evans and Audrey Evans. The Evans family line was for all intents and purposes disqualified from ever receiving it again. My father's head snapped up and his eyes filled with a furious, dawning horror locked onto mine. "You," he seethed. "You did this." My mother started sobbing. "How could you, after everything we've done for you? You destroyed this family's legacy. You destroyed your sister's future." "My future," Audrey shrieked, throwing the letter on the floor. "He destroyed my future, $250,000 gone? Because you couldn't stand to see me have something for once. You did this out of spite, just to hurt me." They swarmed me with their rage and their grief, blaming me for the consequences of their own actions. In their minds, the crime wasn't the fraud, the crime was getting caught, and I was the one who had turned them in. The focus was entirely on the money on the legacy I had supposedly thrown away. They had no idea. The real consequences hadn't even arrived yet. 4 days later, a second letter came. This one was from the university Audrey had been planning to attend. It was addressed directly to her. She tore it open, her hands still shaking with anger from the week's events. This time, there were no loud noises, just a dead, chilling silence. Audrey read the letter, and all the fight just vanished from her body. She sank onto the couch, the paper fluttering from her hand. My mom picked it up and read it aloud, her voice a hollow whisper. "Based on information provided by the Evans Progenitor Grant Board regarding academic dishonesty on your application, we regret to inform you that your offer of admission has been rescinded. This decision is final, blacklisted from any future applications." The room went cold. The loss of the money was one thing, but this was so much worse. This wasn't just a setback, it was a character assassination. The very institution they had tried to deceive had now formally branded my sister a fraud. Her academic future, at least at any reputable school, was over before it had even begun. The true cost of their actions was finally horribly clear. The anger in the room was replaced by a thick, suffocating despair, and I, the agent of that despair, became a pariah in my own home. September 1st arrived, the day I was supposed to be moving into my dorm at my dream university, the day Audrey was supposed to be starting her new life built on lies. Instead, I spent the morning at orientation for the local community college. I had gotten a part-time job at a bookstore to pay my own way. My life was smaller now, harder. I had lost a scholarship worth $250,000. I had lost my family. When I got home that afternoon, I saw Audrey sitting on the living room couch, staring blankly at the TV. She wasn't going anywhere. Her unearned future had been repossessed. My parents were moving around the house like ghosts, the weight of their failure hanging in the air between them. They had gambled my future, and in the end, they had lost everything. They still blame me, of course. In their story, I'm the villain who ruined it all, but as I sat in my room that night looking at my community college textbooks, I didn't feel like a villain. I didn't even feel like a victim anymore. I felt free. It was a Pyrrhic victory, no doubt. I was financially poorer and I was utterly alone. But my integrity was intact. I hadn't let them sacrifice me. I had exposed a toxic system of lies and forced a lesson in consequences that they would never forget. They had tried to steal my future, and in the end, the only thing I truly lost was them. And I realized that wasn't a loss at all. It was the price of my freedom.